And I think it's actually a disadvantage when the first thing that you try wins, because success is really only experienced in proportion to what it costs you to get it. So like we can experience success and have no idea that we're experiencing that because it's become so normal to us. So I'd say like there's a lot of lessons. We could spend the rest of the time talking about the lessons and we can go into the weeds if you want. But the biggest thing probably from a takeaway standpoint is...
So you just gotten out of a pretty shitty season.
Wow, we're going right there.
We're going right there. We're
Cool.
we're diving right in.
I love Jason Portnoy.
So a tough period. That's a good name for a podcast, by the way.
You said it.
I think there are important lessons that you could get from someone's success, but I think there's super important lesson that you could probably pick up when someone's successful, had a setback, and then become successful again, like you just went through, right? You had your success, a little bit of a setback, and then you found major success again. What did you pick up? What lessons did you pick up along the way from the down and the up?
Well, first of all, thank you for acknowledging that I'm successful. That's all I took away from that question.
Should I repeat?
No. What lessons? Wow.
From the down and the up.
Yeah. So I think actually, I didn't realize this until probably about a year and a half ago. I was hopping on with one of my coaches, and she said, your problem, because I was in a mental place where I was like, it's pretty unstable. And nobody knows this. Like from the outside looking in, people never know. This is the problem with social media. You never really know what someone's going through because they're usually not going to talk about it. She said, your problem is everything you've ever tried to do, you've been successful. I was like, that doesn't seem like a problem. But
sounds like a good problem.
She's like, you don't know how to lose. So everyone gets the hits in the face, but if you've had a pile of wins, over time you forget how to lose. And you're freaking out because you don't know how to lose. And I think it's actually a disadvantage when the first thing that you try wins, because success is really only experienced in proportion to what it costs you to get it. So like we can experience success and have no idea that we're experiencing that because it's become so normal to us. So I'd say like there's a lot of lessons. We could spend the rest of the time talking about the lessons and we can go into the weeds if you want. But the biggest thing probably from a takeaway standpoint is my self-confidence 3 years ago was built on money and winning and the accolades. And that's a very futile feeling of success. What my self-confidence is based on now is my ability to bounce back, which is a way healthier way to have confidence. You know, like if you know, I think the definition, Brianna Wiest, have you heard of her?
Yep.
She says that self-confidence is not your confidence of what other people think about you. Self-confidence is really your own belief that you can handle your life. It's great. It's a wonderful definition. And so my biggest lesson of all time, in probably my whole life, when it comes to failure and winning and bounce back, is that I need to train myself, and everyone needs to train themselves to actually put their confidence in their ability to correct bad decisions, not in their ability to make right decisions. This is a totally different type of thinking.
So correct fast.
Correct fast and learn fast. The only way you can learn is through mistakes.
So then, that being said, how can someone listening to this who's had success manufacture some sort of failure so that they don't have to take that swing, right? Because if you're saying failure is a big important part, and you know if everything you touch turns to gold, and you need that failure in order to become a bit more resilient, how can they manufacture failure without kind of like jeopardizing the company or jeopardizing any sort of success, but sort of do something that will kind of mimic the same type of feeling?
You can go slower. So like, I think we as a society, we tend to idolize fast success and speed. In the book, in the Wealthy Consultant book, I talk about this just a little bit I replaced speed of success and expedience with certainty of success. The only long tail certainty that we have is knowing that we can correct. So how do you manufacture mistakes? I think first and foremost, you have to just be willing to try. Right now, people are really biased in how they assess risk. When you think about doing something, the first default response is, what if I do this and it doesn't work? think we should replace that with the bias towards what if I don't do this and nothing changes. We hate the unknown, right? Like, people are really afraid of uncertainty. So in our attempt to avoid uncertainty, we pick the guarantee of failure by doing nothing. And I think it's a mental replacement game. Like, you can't necessarily manufacture the confidence that comes from hitting the bottom. You have to just hit the bottom.
But do you think everyone should hit the bottom?
100%. You've hit the bottom.
You know, it's one of those things. After you're happy, you're kind of happy,
Yeah.
but you don't. No one really wants to hit the bottom.
No
No one
one
listening to
wants
this is successful right now. Is like, hey man,
Can't wait to hit
Taylor's
the bottom.
right, man. Let's just go rock bottom right now.
Yeah. Well, your rock bottom elevates as you go.
And I think there's different rock bottoms, right? Like
Yeah.
depending on the day, right?
Yeah.
You know, no one, like you said, social media, no one sees. No one sees your kid does something, or you got in a fight with your spouse. There's different rock bottoms at different days, right? It's not necessarily like, oh, I just fell and my whole life just crumbled. You know, I heard Damon John. He answered a question similar to that, and he was saying that, which rock bottom do you want me to tell you about? You know,
There's multiples.
I have multiple rock bottoms in different
Yeah.
areas of my life that I
Yeah.
experience every single day. And
Yeah.
because the bar just raises, the rock bottom just becomes a little bit different
Yeah.
every time.
People have different coping mechanisms to deal with it, because you see some people and they go super like nihilist, where it's like nothing matters ever. Hormozy's really good at this. Like, really good at this. Like, nobody's gonna remember you, bro. You're gonna die. Nobody knows anything. Just do what you want. So it's like almost a nihilistic version of like how do you deal with failure? And then some people, they are able to extract competence and lessons from, like, everyone deals with it differently, but the key is really a values thing. Like, for me, I had to change. DeMartini, if you heard of John DeMartini?
Yep.
He's well known for his values curriculum, I guess. It's really a framework. But we all act in alignment with our most important values. If your most important value is to be recognized, or to have money, or to do, you're going to act in alignment with those things. And then when those things are taken away from you, you're going to feel really crummy about it. And so the question is, how do I diversify the way that I feel about myself so that there's not concentration risk in whether I feel good or bad? You know, and so my coach, back to her conversation, she was like, you know, who are you as a business owner? And I had a bunch of things, and she's like, who are you as a husband? I didn't know. Who are you as a dad? And I didn't know. And she was like, oh, so you have no diversity in like how you feel about yourself. So if you lose that one thing that makes you feel special, you're not special anymore. And that kicked off a new era. And that's all of the wealthy consultant stuff that you see today is like, you know, it's more than just one thing.
Or if you base it off how you're perceived by other people, you'd fall into the same type of trap, right? If you're like,
Yeah.
I just want to be respected by other people, I just want this and this and this, you're putting that type of, you're giving them control
Yeah.
into your self-worth.
Yeah. Well, part of it's, we're all combating evolution at this point.
Want to expand on that?
Yeah, like the idea that we can completely disregard what other people think about us is not actually possible, because it's built into our DNA. Like, we never outgrew the tribal mechanisms. This, like, you know, if you're in a tribe 10,000 years ago and you are completely disregarding what people think about you, you just get stoned to death at night. Nobody,
Yeah, you're dead.
You're dead, and then your family, like, you don't survive.
Yeah.
Your lineage ends. So we have to have some sort of like anchoring in who am I to society, who am I to other people. But that can't be transactional. It's got to be longer term than just like, do people follow me on Twitter or do they not? Do people think I'm a good person or do
And
they
who
not?
am I to the right people, right?
100%. Yeah.
Right. I care more about who am I to my wife and to my kids than I do about some
Hopefully.
person down the street. Hopefully, right?
Yeah. But some people don't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you talked about certainty, and you know, it's something I've known you for a bit now. You're a big believer in that, and that we should be more certain. Your team wants a leader who's certain.
Yeah.
Your clients want, you know, someone who they hire to be certain.
Yeah.
How do we become more certain, especially with imposter syndrome or insecurities? What are ways that we could improve certainty?
The easiest way, like the most foundational way, is you pick something that you want to do and you don't quit until you do it.
No matter what.
No matter what. What is certainty? We have to, let's define that. Certainty is you know it's going to happen. The only link you can create to really build certainty is you build up a repository of experiences where you decided to do something or you decided to get something and then you got it. There's a refusal to bow out until you get it. And when we have enough of that repository, we just then the muscle memory kicks in.
So what's the difference between that and perseverance and tenacity?
Well, perseverance is a trait. Certainty is probably more of a state or an identity. Like certainty, you fill the room with it. It feels like you can tell when you're talking to somebody who's certain. And I think tenacity is more of a tool to get a timeline moved up. Tenacity, and better than tenacity would probably just be resilience. Resilience would be tenacity pro rata distributed over a long period of time.
But it's the same thing, right? It's not giving up until you get what you want. So does resilience, perseverance, tenacity, all that help you become more certain?
It helps you. I think tenacity it tends to be more aggressive. So tenacity is Bill Gates and John Rockefeller and these guys who were like, they were ferocious and aggressive. Whereas resilience tends to be more of at least the way that I view it is more of like, Elon just doesn't quit. Like, it doesn't matter. He'll just never quit. And so that's why I would say resilience is more of a longer term tenacity applied to difficult things over and over and over again.
But if certainty is never quitting until you get what you want, you're also a big advocate of sometimes it's good to quit.
Quitting the wrong things, yeah.
Yeah, so how do you know if you're building certainty doing the right things or the wrong things, and how do you know if you should quit if that will affect your certainty?
It's a wonderful question. You pick the right things. Because that's the ultimate failure, the failure that hurts us the most is actually winning the wrong things. So we're training on this tomorrow of like, how do you set, I think it's Richard Koch, he said, the worst failure is trying to win a race that somebody else put you in. Like, you didn't pick that race. You're running that race for your parents or for someone else. It's not your race. And so we mess up our certainty. We mess up our internal state when we're doing a bunch of things that don't really matter to us. They're not really meaningful to us. And that's when we lose our torque. So to go back to the original philosophy of like quitting the wrong things, that saying of like winners never quit and quitters never win is bogus. Like, it's dumb. Because if you're a winner, you have to have the ability to say, this is not what I want anymore. Like, this is not important to me anymore. But that's different than giving up because there's resistance.
I can see how that might create uncertainty, though. If you're saying, you stuck to something for so long and you're like, this just isn't the right thing anymore, I gotta leave, that can make you uncertain of like, can I even decide or differentiate between the right and the wrong things, which takes you down a rabbit hole of being uncertain.
Let's use you as an example.
Let's not. No, I'm kidding. Go.
Or we can use me.
No,
okay.
go.
Okay, so are you certain that you will always be there for your kids?
I'd like to think so.
Yeah.
I'd like to think so, but I mean, I could get hit by a car tomorrow, so I can't be 100% certain.
Well, that's not what I'm talking about. Are you certain that you'll always be a good dad? It's so long up to your intellect is kicking in. So long as that you're living
PTSD
and breathing. Are you certain that you will prioritize your kids?
Yes.
Are you certain that you will always prioritize the relationships that matter to you?
Less.
Okay. Are you certain that you will always be in this specific line of business?
No.
Okay. So now we have a hierarchy of things inside of this concept of certainty. And the hierarchy reflects your values, which ties us back to DeMartini. The things that you are most committed to are the things that you value the highest. And that's where you need certainty the most. Why would we quit something that is no longer important to us is because it's violating a different value that's more important to us. That's a healthy thing. That's really good for us. So I don't think that quitting the wrong thing should impact our certainty. I think that we should make sure that we are aware of what's driving us, why it's driving us, and subscribe to the philosophy that I will only invest my effort into the things that are the most important to what I actually want.
So let's talk about that. I think, one thing I've learned from you, and I think that's been super important, and I started seeing it in clients too, since we've started really focusing on it, is knowing what you want.
Yeah.
I think too many people have no clue what they want. They know a lot of things that they don't want, which is why they don't get the things that they actually want, or they just they can't figure out what they actually want. It's like, what do you want? I want to do 50 million in revenue. Why? I don't know. Well, what if you did 20 million and you made, $50 million profit? Yeah, that's good. So it's like they have no clue what they want. What would you tell the listeners in terms of what's a good process to actually learn how to figure out what you want? It's one of the hardest things. And I've spoken to people, say, what do you want? Even for myself, for me to sit down and actually figure out and learn how to do it was one of the hardest things such an easy question if you think about it, but so hard to actually sit down and think about are the heuristics, what's involved in actually, if you could help the listeners figure out what they want or even learn to sit and think better.
Visualization, morning formula stuff, like try it on. Part of it depends on if you're a deductive thinker.
But you kind of have to know what you want in the morning formula, right? So
technically, no. Technically not, because if you let's say that someone's listening and like they've never started a business before, how would you know that you want a business? The only way to figure out what you actually want is to experience life. But what people forget is that there are two ways to experience the same thing. One is experiencing it mentally before it ever occurs. Joe Dispenza has an amazing bits on this. And visualization can happen just by sitting in your living room thinking about it. The brain is not necessarily parsing between like this has happened versus this has not happened. If you are consistent with it, it kicks off signals that it's important to you. So it's not the intensity of the moment. It's the intensity applied over a long enough time horizon to tell us what's important to us. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but you can.
No, I'm not done.
Okay, go. Sorry.
I'm still going. I just want to make sure that makes sense.
I'm following.
So if you do something for 2 days, that's not effective. It doesn't tell you anything about what's important to you. If you do something for 200 days, it starts being taken seriously. So if you visualize an outcome for 200 days, 400 days, eventually you begin to get a feel for whether this feels good. Is this fun? Is this not? Like, do I actually still want this? And so we can experience the things before we actually have them. The question was, how would you tell the listeners what's a good heuristic or a process for determining what they want? It would be visualization. Try it on. Try it before you buy it.
So if you don't know, it's just start somewhere. Pick something, see how that feels.
Yeah.
And if you don't like it, start adjusting. But just pick something. So like just head in one direction and then figure it out.
Yeah, and the thing I would pick first is try it on mentally and visualize it and see what it's like, because everything has a price tag on it. So if you buy a hoodie and it's $50, that might be a great hoodie. But if you buy a hoodie and it's $5,000, so you just got ripped off. So the difference is, one is currency with the monetary attachment. The other is currency with your time. And so sometimes we hit these roadblocks where I no longer feel like this is worth the effort and the cost, so I no longer care about this thing. And that is when I think quitting actually becomes healthy, because you're overpaying for it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but how do you know you're quitting because there's a disalignment between whether you actually want it or not versus it just got tough and it's really bad and you're going through a bad period right now, like business, you have ups and downs. You got through a bad period and you just may not be resilient enough.
Yeah. If you no longer care about the outcome, then it doesn't matter. If you care about the outcome, like if you wave a magic wand.
But in a shitty situation, everyone always sits there and says, I don't care what's going to happen now. I just want out. I'm done dealing with clients. I'm done dealing with this. Like, I'm done. But they're not really done. They just had a bad day. And they just need some time.
In that case, yeah, they should go work for you. I mean, some people aren't born to be there. But there have been experiences I've had where I no longer care. This is not, if you waved a magic wand and I was there tomorrow, it's no longer where I want my life to be pointed. And that's when the resistance is no longer resistance, it's drag, it's obligation, and the cost doesn't get you anything.
Except when you're in a position like that and you realize it, but it's the financial security of your family, right? You have a job, it's been making a ton of money, and you wake up one day and you're like, this is not right at all. It becomes one of those easier said than done, right? Which, like in life, everything is easier said than done. But it's one of those easier said than done moments of like, I got to make a switch. My own happiness matters more, or these values matter more. But how do I walk away from something that's just like taking care of my entire family?
You create something else if that's what it requires. I mean, I've done that. I've done that several times. But I think that that's where the visualization piece comes back in. If you think about it, if I have a hard day, and I have many, I think everyone has that. You don't ever graduate from that. But if I have a really difficult day or a difficult week, my default thinking is never like, like F clients, they suck. Like, I don't think that that's actually true. I don't think that that's the first mode of defense. I still really care about the outcome. I think that a lot of people are doing things that they should not be doing. They're building businesses maybe that they shouldn't be building. If the repeat theme is like, this was hard, screw this, I don't like it, I think you're probably in the wrong line of work.
I just think we've seen so many people on social media glamorize certain things.
100%.
I think something I think a lot about is I think a lot of entrepreneurs that are struggling right now and have mental health issues or depression probably are better off going to get a job and being an entrepreneur and still having the same type of outlet, but not having all the weight on it and doing all that. What are your thoughts on how entrepreneurship is being perceived right now and the whole mental health component tied to it?
I think it's balancing out. I think for a while it was super sexy to be an entrepreneur, and now people are starting to realize like you can build for a while there's this thing where it's people like you can't build wealthy if you're an entrepreneur, and my thinking on that is it's just childish. Like, you can build wealth working for another person's vision and mission. I think it's balancing out in that people are realizing it's really hard. And unless you are curious about it and passionate about it, like what are you deeply curious about? What are you awake at? You should have been in bed at 9:30. You're awake at 11 because you're curious about it. That's something you could build a business around, and it's probably going to be fine. You're going to have really difficult days, but because there's interest there and there's curiosity there, you're obviously connected to it. I think the problem is when it's like you have these build an agency in 90 days or your money back bullshit, where people are like, oh, like, yeah, I don't like being poor, so I'll just build an agency. Well, when that agency gets difficult, you have no staying power, because it's really hard to be resilient around something that was just transactional. Like, you're just cost benefit. Yeah, you shouldn't have done it in the first place. When you have something that you're like, I care about this, whether it's the most successful thing ever or not, you have staying power, which ties us back into resilience versus just being able to stay in the game. We want to stay in the game on the things that matter to you.
So you consume a lot of information, you read a lot, and I'm the same way. But the famous quote, right? Most people die from indigestion, not starvation. At some point, you got to stop consuming and go do. How do you know you reach that level? Like, people are sitting there saying, we live in an area where people are buying course after course, program after program, and they just don't go do the work, or they're reading book after book and never implement after any of the books. What's your strategy of how you consume information and then actually go act on it versus just intellectual masturbation?
I have a long digestion period. So my incubation period, I like to learn because learning actually feeds a part of me. So I enjoy learning not because of what it can do for me, but because I think that that's how I advance as a human. But I'm not super concerned with like the speed of like how quickly I read a book and then implement it. To me, there's like the best inventions come from like long continuous effort to solve a difficult problem. So I don't necessarily have that threshold.
So you have a program, right? So let's talk about Chamber or the Wealthy Consultant or something like that. You constantly put out different playbooks, more information. At what point do you think you might just confuse the people watching it or consuming your content because they're like, hey, maybe I need to get better at sales, and then all of a sudden a new playbook hits and it's like the shiny, oh, I got to go learn all about this, and they completely get pulled off of what they should actually be doing.
If someone's consuming content because they need a certain thing fixed in their life, then I think that brings in the like problem to be solved thinking. So like, what is the problem we're trying to solve? You'll get a lot further if you have a problem, read the same materials more than once and really get it in you and really clone the thinking of who you're studying. When people are grasping at straws trying to go through everything at once, then that's where the confusion occurs. And that confusion occurs just like from a subconscious level, where it's like I'm being told to do too many things at the same time. So focus is really important, but I'm actually not, I wouldn't even consider myself like a master at focus. Like you go talk to Sam Ovens about that, like monk mode, or who's the dude who built Hyros?
Alex Becker.
Alex Becker. And for a while, like he had a bed in his apartment and that's it. So he just had one bed and then a computer. I'm not about that. Like that's not my main skill. My main skill is I want to have enough exposure to enough mental models and different playbooks so that if you drop me in the middle of a business, within a relatively short matter of time, I can see where the holes are and the gaps are. Charlie Munger if you go through Charlie Munger's like risks that he looked at with businesses, it ranged from psychological risks of like the founder, the market, the financial statements, technology. I mean, he was so wide ranging.
So you're pro generalist versus specialist.
100%. Right now, yes.
What do you mean by right now? You say it was specialist, it's now generalist. What's the difference between the two, and why is now the period for the generalist? Why'd we shift?
We're specifically talking about like founders, right?
Yep.
So a founder is usually going to have to be a CEO for a while. So that they're going to have to go into different things, different departments. When I started, I was just a copywriter. So I didn't have to know, I just had to know the subject matter, and then I had to be a really good copywriter. I would say like specific jobs, like if you're a media buyer, then it pays to be a specialist in that. If you're a copywriter, it pays to be a specialist in that. If you're a chiropractor...
Like you want your job.
Yes.
You want your job or profession, or if you're hiring someone, you want them to be a specialist in that area.
Like,
but you're saying a founder needs to be... But it's funny because when I started going through business, it was all taught depth, not width.
Yeah.
And now it's width, not depth.
Because you're managing, like Henry Ford was a generalist. So he was a CEO who was like... there's a famous story of Henry Ford where he's like he's in court, he's on trial, and they're asking him questions about stupid stuff, like how heavy is this part?
Can pick up the phone?
He's like, I don't know, I'll just pick up the phone and call my team and ask them. So it depends on your position. If I'm going to see like a surgeon, I would prefer them to be a specialist because that's what they do. But if I'm going to get an annual checkup, that person should be more general because they're going to have to be more wide-ranging. Society at large, I think the access we have to information has slowly expanded people's minds. If we need a specific question answered, we can find it pretty quickly. But what is difficult to do is assimilation. So assimilating a little bit here, a little bit there, a little bit here, that allows you to be more effective on a wider surface area. So as a CEO, I need to be more of a generalist because I have a great team. And I can just say like, hey, let's just get this, let's do this. Go deep on it, but I need to know a little bit about it so I can lead them effectively. And then a little bit about this and a little bit about this. So like
I'm not a financial expert. I'm
Enough
not a
where you're not
CFO.
abdicating, right? Where you're not just
Right.
completely abdicating the checkbook or the marketing off.
Right. No. I know enough to be able to look at financial statements. I know the difference between accrual and cash. I know how to see if something's off, but I'm not a master at like advanced debt structures, and like I don't need to. Someone else is, and I pay them to do it for me.
It's funny because I credit my success, especially on the agency side. Like I love that generalists are now winning because that's what I am.
Yeah.
I was never the most talented media buyer. I was never the most talented person, but I understood marketing as a principle. And I thought that was way better than ever knowing what buttons to press.
Yeah.
Because, like you said, if you understand copy, if you understand persuasion, you understand how everything plays into one thing. You're not just one-dimensional.
Right.
And I think that's what made me successful as a marketer, was that I understood it across that range. But I went through that period where it was like, no, you have to be really good at Facebook ads. You have to know all the manual bidding strategies. You have to do all that. And that kind of held me back from growth for a long time, because I felt insecure. I'm like, I don't stack up. What if I start talking about marketing to someone and they ask me a manual bidding question I don't know, and then why should we ever hire Jason's agency to do our Facebook ads? The guy couldn't even answer a simple manual bidding question.
Yeah.
And it's only like now did I get into the groove of realizing like, no, like, but I hire the people who can answer those
it's a
questions.
sequence question more than anything. Like if you are at the beginning of your journey, then the specialist is like a good mindset to have, because you have to get good at one thing and get it working. Then once you get to the next level where you have like
Or just get really good at hiring people.
you could, but then you don't have money.
Yeah.
Usually at the beginning you don't have, so you can't afford to do that. So getting good at one thing, getting to the next level, you have middle level management that kind of comes in and you can have them make sure the work's being done. And then over time, like you get to the place where you're not actually doing anything, you're thinking, you're getting paid to think. You're getting paid to build culture and make sure people talk to one another and that there's meritocracy in the organization and the truth is being told rather than just digging into a Facebook ad account.
Yeah, I think the biggest eye-opener for me was the book, Gino Wickman's book about integrator and visionary.
Yeah. Traction.
No, his other one.
Oh.
The one that was written after Traction, where it was like pretty much, it tells you that there are two types of people you need to be in a business. You need to have the visionary, you need to have the integrator. But so many visionaries want to be integrators and so many integrators want to be visionary. But if you could find the right integrator, and it made me realize that I'm a visionary. And for the longest time, I didn't even think that was a role in business, that even had a place.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that was the biggest thing. I want to wrap up with this question. One of the biggest slogans you have is, "Rich isn't
Rich is not wealthy.
Rich is not wealthy."
Yeah.
So I tell this story a lot. Around a year ago, before I met you and started hanging out with you and following you, I was on a vacation with my family. It was the first vacation I took in 5 years, and it was completely first time I ever disconnected. And before that, I never took a vacation. Before that, it was always work. And I remember I'd have meetings with my wife. We would sit at dinner and I'd be like, just letting you know, we're sacrificing this now so we can enjoy it later. I'm gonna have to do certain things. We're gonna have to give things up. We're gonna have to do a bunch of different things. And we sat on this vacation. She forced me to go on this vacation pretty much. And I watched my kids' faces light up at an event. And I said I would give everything, any amount of money to freeze frame in this moment and just live in this moment for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
Just this moment, seeing my kids' faces, seeing just everything. It was just the experience. Like they still talk about it to this day.
Yeah.
And it's like, man, how do I create more moments? How do I create the moments? And everything switched. I had a coaching program before that was called like Market Domination Method, which was all about like, how do you dominate your market? How to just go. And then I remember I went live inside that group and I told them everything's switching. Right? Now it's going to be about how do you build the business around the life you want, not the life you want around the business. And that's when I started, seeing your stuff pop up and it really resonated and it hit. And, I subconsciously always made that decision. I walked away from a clothing brand because I wasn't happy. And I chose, my wife was like, you're miserable, do something. And I walked away from a brand that was doing well, never had a down year because I just wasn't happy. Something I'm sure you could relate to. You walked away from something that was successful.
Yeah.
How do we become better at choosing happiness? I know that's a really loaded question, but I think the people listening right now, I mean, I think deep down they all know what will make them happy. And I think it just becomes a tough decision to be happy. And in your mind, is there a big difference between happiness and content? Because I think a lot of people who think they're happy are content.
Yeah. I'm most happy when I feel like what I'm doing means something, like it's worth it. That begs the question of like, worth what? You have to know what you want. Just kind of dovetails us beautifully into the first part of the interview. But I'm pretty
It's like
clear.
I know what I'm doing.
Yeah, you're pretty good at this.
Yeah.
I know I'm clear on what I want. I have clarity. Clarity begets certainty. And now I'm not content with anything, really. I think they're very different. Contentment, since to me it feels...
Do you think most people are confusing their happiness?
I think so, yeah. I think people expect happiness to feel a certain way, but happiness is really just the enjoyment that comes from advancing through difficulty. So I'm very happy right now, but my life is pretty hard as well. Like my job is hard, and my pace is pretty intense at the moment. So I'm prioritizing my family, but I'm still like, I'm not at home every day, all day playing Legos. It's only really fulfilling if it's difficult. So contentment means you've gotten to a place where there's nothing you would change, and if there's nothing you would change, it means there's no problems.
But isn't that a good thing?
I don't think it's
isn't it a good thing
productive.
that life is so good, you feel so blessed that you don't want to change anything?
Yeah,
like that sounds like a good place to be.
If you don't pick difficulty, then life will force you into it. So any moment where it's like there's nothing I would change right now should be enjoyed as just a temporary bliss. Like maybe you're on vacation with your kids and you're like, there's nothing I would change right now.
Yeah.
But the only reason you were able to take that vacation is because there were things that you changed for other people or for your business or for your market 2 years ago that allowed you the financial ability to do that. So I don't think certainty is a long-term, or contentment is not a long-term state. And if it becomes a long-term state, it just means you're not solving any problems. You have no problems.
So there's a lag on happiness?
Happiness is to me is a choice, and it's a state, and it's a perspective, and it's an understanding that when I'm gone and when I'm no longer here, the world will be better because I was here for a time. That's my
your
version of
definition
happiness.
Yeah.
And I'm never going to be content because I'm a driver, and that doesn't mean I can't be happy. Happiness to me is just circumstances are not required.
How do you get to the point to choose happiness? Because you were doing stuff that you didn't want to be doing. Like you talk about this all the time, even before with trafficking funnels. That at a moment like you didn't want to be doing it, you kept going back in. Like how'd you learn to choose happiness?
Well, I was doing things that I didn't want to be doing, yes, but that wasn't the problem. The problem was I was doing things I didn't want to be doing for things that I didn't care about. That was the problem. So that's why my life now is just as hard as it was then, but I really care about what I'm doing for people, and I care about where we're heading, and our destinations are meaningful to me now. They weren't meaningful to me a couple of years ago. And how do you choose happiness? Sometimes I don't. I think it's a pipe dream that you're always going to like have the proper perspective. This is why, like, if I can teach somebody something, I would rather teach them the rhythm and the routine and the process of having a weekly review and a daily review and these things that they keep you on. We're missiles. We're not static. So we're always moving and we're always off pace. And we're always in a position where there's something in our lives that we would change or fix. And if you don't have anything in your life that you would change, I would recommend exposure to people who are ahead of you. because then real quick you'll be like, oh, well, why am I flying commercial? Like, or why do I live in this house? Or why? There's always going to be something that you're going to want to change, or that you can get exposure to show you those things. Does that make sense?
100%. And we'll end with this question. I heard an interview from a doctor, a PhD doctor, who was talking about constraint theory. And he was talking about how we should choose the impossible dream. And something you've talked about, the big goal. Because if you choose the impossible goal, then your brain starts thinking outside the box on how to get it. Versus if you choose a realistic goal, your brain already assumes it knows the answer on how to get there, and you won't even think outside the box. What are your thoughts on how we could think bigger? Because I think whenever Trump tries to think bigger, it's not big enough, right? It's not enough to pull them forward. It's enough to kind of maybe create a little bit of movement, but not enough to really yank them out of their seats and pull them forward.
Yeah, the way I do it is if I can pretend and get myself into the state where there is no such thing as failure.
It's impossible unless, pretty much.
Yeah, then I'm going to trust the barometer of like whatever level I'm thinking at when fear is not present is a healthy level for me. And I just go with that. But anytime I have fear present, fear drags down the cap. It puts a lid on it. Because if you're afraid to fail at something, you're going to lower it down until you no longer feel like you can fail.
And do you put constraints on yourself?
No.
So you're not a believer in like constraint theory?
Constraint theory, I'm a yes for operations, but not really for setting goals. So there's differences. Like one is what do I want, and the other is how do I get it. Those are two different types of thinking for me. So what do I want? No constraints. I don't want any limiters on it.
Yep.
And fear is the biggest limiter. But how do I get it? That's when constraints become really effective, because. And this is a reversal of what the PhD guy is talking about. This would be more of a Keith Cunningham style of constraints. Let's say I want to have $100 million a year of revenue. The constraints thinking for me would be backing into the operations. So how do I hit $100 million working 1 day a week? The constraint is put onto the system so that the throughput has to change. Throughput is how you take something from a piece of scrap metal to a vehicle, right? So that's the process of getting it done. And if you can figure out how to hit $100 million working 1 day a week, then you're probably going to have a really good system to do $100 million working 5 days a week.
Love it.
So it's just different.
Perfect. Thanks, buddy.